Hey there, my name is Lexi, and thank you so much for joining me for another studio session. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about communicating with your engineer and certain things that you can keep in mind to make sure that your session is running smoothly and that you're getting the sound you want out of your song. In previous videos, I lightly went over what the role of the engineer is during your whole creative process and why he or she needs to be there for you. But in this video, I want to make sure I let it be known some things that you can do and keep in mind, again, to keep that communication smooth with your engineer. Now, as I always tell you, you are the artist. It's all about you and how you want things to be and what's going to make you most comfortable during a session. But it's really important that you're able to communicate what you want, because you can have a vision, but if you're not able to clearly communicate exactly what it is that you want and how you want things to be done, then how can you expect that vision to come to life? So I'm going to be giving you a few pointers and a few things to look out for to make sure that you are communicating with your engineer as best as possible. So I'm going to break it down into 3 sections. So there's going to be a portion where you're in the booth before you start recording. There's going to be during the recording, and then playback when you're listening to everything that you just did. So when you're in the booth, this is before you're even starting the whole recording process. You want to make sure that you're comfortable. So the first thing that obviously is going to be the most important is the placement of the mic. That's going to be what ensures your sound quality, where the mic is placed and where the sound source is. So depending on whether you want to stand up or if you're going to sit down, you want to make sure the mic height is just right for you. You don't want to be, you don't want the mic to be so low that you're bending over and your throat is bent over, essentially restricting any airflow from freely flowing through your throat. But then on the same token, you don't want the microphone to be so high that you're straining to sing up into the microphone, right? You want it to be just right so that you're comfortable. And again, that's going to depend on whether you're standing or sitting down. If the mic is too high or too low, just ask the engineer if he or she can adjust it for you accordingly. The next thing you want to think about is, are you comfortable in your recording environment? And the most basic way that I can make that be known is, do you like it with the lights on or off? I'm going to keep that on because it makes me look pretty good in this video. But anyway, yeah, do you like the lights on or off? You may want the lights to be on in the booth because you might have your lyrics written down on a notebook and you obviously want to be able to see what those are while you're recording. Or you might like the lights off because you have your lyrics on your phone, or being in the dark just sets a better mood or allows you to be more free during your recording process. So keep that in mind. And the next thing before you get started is a test run. Now, the engineer is going to ask you to do a test run because he or she is going to want to know how much signal to let into Pro Tools to make sure that, you know, the best sound quality and the best signal strength is coming through to Pro Tools. So during the run through, sing the song the exact same way that you're going to perform it, because that's going to give the most accurate reading of how much signal the engineer is supposed to let in. So if you're just whispering into the microphone and, you know, just barely going into it, barely have any levels coming through, that's not a very accurate reading of, you know, what's going to need to happen during your song. So make sure that you're performing it the exact same way that you're going to say it when it comes time to record for real. The run through is just a good way for you to get a little bit of practice in, or maybe even a little bit of a warm up before you start recording for real. But it's also good for your engineer to get a little bit more familiar with your song. So during the run through time, again, we're checking for levels, but the engineer is also probably going to be outlining your song as far as where the hook is placed, where the verse is, where the bridges are. And if you allow that little time for the engineer to do that, it's going to make the editing process a lot smoother when it comes time to do things like flying the hook or copying it down along the track. So keep that in mind. Those are some things to keep in mind before you even get into the recording process. Now, during the recording process, that's when you're going to go into laying down everything onto the track and actually saying all the pieces of the song that are going to be included, right? So the most important thing to remember is communication is going to be very key during the recording process. It could be the difference between getting 6 songs done in 4 hours or barely getting halfway through one song within 2 hours. If you're making sure that you have a good line of communication during the recording process, things can go very smoothly. Otherwise, things can get really bad and really awkward, really annoying really quickly. So the first thing I want you to keep in mind is the way that you're communicating, like the technicality of everything. You have a microphone in front of you. Whenever you want to tell your engineer something, speak into the microphone. If you're not speaking into the microphone, it's going to be really hard for the engineer to hear you otherwise. And you'll be able to hear your engineer through something that's called a talkback, which is basically just a little button that the engineer presses so that you can hear his or her voice within your headphones. With this, that's going to keep you in the booth. You don't have to leave the booth for any reason, unless you have to go to the bathroom or eat or something. But essentially, the microphone and the talkback, that's going to allow you to stay into the booth, so you're not having to walk back and forth and you're not having to waste time telling things to your engineer. Just speak into the microphone. Your engineer can hear you just fine that way. So during the recording process, while you're actually recording your song, there are inevitably going to be a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. Just keep in mind, again, how you are communicating with the engineer as far as where you want to do things, where you want to go to redo certain parts, right? So I want you to keep in mind that it's going to be a lot better for you to stay specific about where you want to redo things. So don't just say things like keep that or go back. Instead, say things like, let's go back to the first verse. I want to re-say the word blah, blah, blah. Or I want to re-say the phrase blah, blah, blah at the end of that hook. Just try to make sure you're being as specific as possible. Now, your engineer is supposed to be very attentive, but a good engineer, as all good engineers do, will be able to breeze through your commands, very easily if you're being very specific about where you want. And the same thing goes to when you're about to record. So usually the engineer is going to start you, a few bars or a few lines before the next part that's going to be recorded. If you find that you're starting too far back, just tell the engineer, hey, can you start me a little closer to the next part that we're about to do? Or if you're starting too soon, just tell the engineer, hey, can you start me back a little further? Or can you start me at the top of the verse, the middle of the verse, something like that. So again, the engineer knows exactly where to go, and it just makes things so much easier, trust me. Try to stay as specific as possible. If I reiterate nothing else, I want you to really keep that in mind, to try to stay as specific as you can. So now I want to talk about the language that most engineers are used to hearing. And this is going to pertain to after you've laid down some parts and you might want to add those little details. So the main things that people ask to do are to do stacks or dubs, and then there are in and outs and ad libs. So with a stack, that's going to be saying whatever part you're saying, word for word, line for line, performing it the exact same way so that you have 2 or 3 takes playing at the same time. And what that does is it's just going to make that entire part sound a lot thicker and a lot more full. So that's what a stack is. It's also called a dub. So when you're going back and you're saying, I want to put more on that part, say something more like, I want it to sound more full, so let's go back and do a stack. Let's go back and do a dub. And your engineer will know exactly what you're talking about. Another thing that you might run into, in and outs, which is similar to a stack, but with an in and out, you're not saying every line, every word for word over. You're just accenting little parts or emphasizing certain words or certain phrases. So you're going in and out of the verse or in and out of the hook. So again, it's to give emphasis, to make certain words or phrases more bold or thicker, a little more fuller. So kind of like a stack, except you're not saying the whole thing over, just little words, little phrases here and there, in and out of the verse. The next thing that you may run into, you may want to do ad libs. Now, an ad lib, think about like Migos, the way that they do it. They're really good about doing ad libs, actually. That's those little phrases that they add into the verse or the hook. It's like, whoo, yeah, that way, stuff like that, like sound effects. So an ad lib, it's not necessarily a word or a phrase that's in the verse or the hook, but it's inspired by the verse or the hook, and it's essentially like little sound effects or extra lines. In rap music, it would be like what the Migos do when they're doing those whoo, yeah, 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 whoo. In R&B, it might be those really long runs like woo. And again, it's not really any specific line that was said in the verse. It's just little extra words or phrases or sounds that you can add in there to bring more personality to your song. It doesn't have to have been written in. It's something that's on the fly. So those are what ad-libs are. Ooh, yeah. Ow. Man. So now let's talk about the last part of your session, which is going to be the playback portion of your session. So playback just means that you've recorded everything from your song, you put all the little details and little nuances in it that you wanted to be included, and now you're out of the booth, you're in the same room as your engineer, you're reviewing the song and listening back to everything that you did. That's what a playback is. During this portion of your session, you are going through to listen to any mistakes that you may have made, to see if maybe you stumbled over some words, some things need to be resaid, or seeing if you want to add any more detail, or basically seeing if there's anything that you can do sonically to affect how you're sounding to get a sound that's closer to what you envisioned in your mind, right? So during this process, I really want you to keep in mind that first and foremost, you have to record something the right way to make it sound amazing during the whole mixing process or cleanup process. If you mess up really badly on something, don't expect your engineer to be able to fix that in the mix. Just do it right the first time, and then it's going to sound amazing during the mixing and the editing portion of your session. So just keep that in mind. If you sang something way off key, don't expect the engineer to just be able to throw auto-tune onto that and make it sound pretty. First off, auto-tune is a corrective plugin, and it's meant for you to have a little bit of singing voice, right? It's not meant for someone who's just completely off key, because then that's when you get that robotic sound. But anyway, it's a corrective process. It's not something that's meant to just slap over it and suddenly everything sounds amazing. No, do it right the first time, and then it's going to sound amazing during the mixing process. So definitely keep that in mind. But during the whole playback process, you are going through and you're adding drops to the song, or you're adding reverb or delay. A drop in the song, that's basically going to be a part where the beat will cut out, and it just adds more emphasis to certain words, certain phrases in your song. It sounds really cool. Well-placed drop really could make a hit song, as well as well-placed ad-libs. But that's a drop. Reverb, that's an effect that's going to make your vocals sound thicker, but also more spacey. So it'll make you sound like you're in the bathroom recording. That reverb sound, that thickness, the fullness that you might hear in the bathroom, that's what reverb is. So you can add more of that or take it off. A delay is essentially an echo. You can add more of that to the song. Other than that, there are other little things that you can tell your engineer, which the engineer probably won't get too much into actually editing your vocals to make them stand out the most from your track during the recording process. That's going to be during mixing, but the engineer can give you a nice little rough mix. But you might tell the engineer things like make the vocals sound brighter, so the engineer might EQ some things, or you can ask the engineer to maybe nudge your vocals over a little bit to make it sound more on beat if that's what you want. And there's just a lot of different things that you can do when it comes to how you want your song to sound. And again, you just have to be able to clearly communicate, you know, what you heard in your head, and the engineer will do his or her best to translate that to whatever you have at the moment, you know. So many different sounds you can make. There are many different options. Yeah, it's really just going to depend on what you want. I don't have too much more of a better explanation of that, but just keep in mind, again, that if you record it right the first time, it's going to sound amazing during the whole playback portion. I think that's everything I had to say on this particular topic of communicating with your engineer. So I hope that you as the artist have learned a lot about some things that you can do and keep in mind during your recording session to keep things running smoothly and, to make sure that you're getting what you want and that the vibe of the session isn't compromised due to a lack of communication between you and your engineer. So definitely keep these little tips in mind. And if you have any more questions about, what happens during a session or just any part of being in the studio or recording or mixing, anything like that, again, just send me your questions. You can comment below in the comment section, or you can send me an email at info@lexiatl.com, which I'll leave that in the comment section or in the description box below so you can have that information. But yeah, let me know if you're an artist and you've had maybe some situations where things didn't really go as planned, and maybe I can help give some advice on how to better handle those things in the future. Let me know what your experience has been with engineers, if you had good engineers or bad engineers. I'm really curious to know different people's dealings. So me as an artist, I engineer myself because that's what I went to school for, so haven't really had to deal with that very much. So all of these tips that I gave you in this video is just based off of things that I've observed as an engineer, engineering for other artists, and things that have helped my sessions go by more smoothly. But again, if you want more pointers, more advice, just let me know. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more content like this, please give me a big thumbs up, subscribe, and yeah, I will keep them coming for you each and every week. But again, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, peace. If you look to the top left-hand side of your screen in Pro Tools, you'll see that there are these 4 squares here, or rectangles, whatever you want to call it. There's shuffle, slip, spot, and grid. These are the different editing options that Pro Tools allows you to work within during your session, depending on, what you